Clark is a lawyer, he could last dream. He's the first man to prove it.
There he is.
What's going on, fishy friends? We are here live in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to upload some pictures of some of the awesome puppy drum we caught today.
Oh, we had a great day fishing today. It was awesome.
We probably caught, what, 30, 40 puppy drum, and then we each got a black drum.
Yes.
Who caught the biggest fish today?
By a quarter of an inch, maybe you.
Well, we had a great day. We're going to be down here for another 6 days. Lots of great content coming your way. We're in an Airbnb, and the internet here is spotty, so maybe give me a thumbs up at home if you guys can hear me, or give me a thumbs down if this is not working well. Got Lady C with us tonight. How you doing?
I'm feeling good, especially after a great day of fishing we had.
Yeah. We did. It was a good day.
It was a great day. Great company. I guess we'll talk more about that later.
Talk about that.
Yes.
We're excited to have Captain Travis Long with us tonight.
Travis.
Super excited about that.
Yes.
Upcoming, we got Jim Cooper from Heroes on the Water coming up next Thursday. We're super excited about that, guys. There's going to be some great content on that show, great prizes to give away. But more than anything, log in to show your support for a great organization that helps out wounded veterans and gets them on the water in kayaks with great volunteers that assist them along the way. And after that, we were supposed to have actually Butch tonight, but Butch had some scheduling issues, so we moved things around and got Travis to move his week around, which was fantastic.
Travis, the Beast Master.
The Beast Master, the guy that pulls the biggest fish over the gunnels. But yeah, Travis, he's a teacher by day, charter fisherman by night. He's helped me out a lot. Super nice guy, super generous with information, and we are really going to break stuff down tonight to make you all a better anglers. I'm going to bring Travis in now. Hey, Travis, how you doing, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm a little jealous I'm not down there fishing. It sounds like y'all had a good day.
We did. Can you hear us all right, Travis?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sometimes the video is a little off, but I can hear fine.
Oh, boy.
Well, yeah, this will be like a throwback show. It'll be like internet in the 90s. Remember when video was like a robot?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. How you been, buddy?
I've been pretty good. Just living the dream, work, travel hockey with my son, and, getting out when I can. My boat's been in a shop a little bit, but should be getting it back soon.
But you've been fishing, haven't you? When was the last time you went out fishing?
It was probably about 2 weeks ago. Been getting out with LJ, which you had last week a few times, and we've been doing pretty well out in the channel. People watched the podcast last week. They heard a lot about that, but there's been some good fish out in the channel. It's been a lot of fun. Changing the presentation up a little bit, but we've had some good success out there. Really good, especially in January.
So I was talking to Anastasia about this before, and we were like, I wonder who's been catching more fish, LJ or Travis. I'm not going to tell you who I picked, but who's been out fishing who recently?
Well, that's easy. It's the curse of the captain. LJ's busy putting the boat on the fish. He's the first one. He's the last one to cast and the first one to reel in. So usually the captain doesn't get to catch too many fish. So it would be his passengers. His passengers are definitely catching more fish. But the good thing is when you're the captain, you get credit for every fish. So it all works out.
For sure. Before we, I really want to get into the nitty gritty of jigging and fishing tonight. I think that's important. As a lot of people that are watching have probably heard me say before, I really want this channel. We want this channel to be about, teaching and helping new anglers get involved in the sport. But before we do that, and we're going to get really detail oriented tonight, hopefully, Travis, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in fishing. Maybe your early days of fishing. What kind of sparked you as a young man?
Well, it definitely started with my dad. My grandfather used to fish down at Point Lookout. They had a boat that they kept down there, and I remember they were doing, trolling and light tackle fishing all the way back then. We had our it's a lot of bucktails, and the BKDs came a little bit later. And early on, I still remember when we would catch trout and use trout for bait for rockfish because they were that plentiful way back then. And, then when I moved, I got into most teenagers, doing a lot of farm pond fishing, trying to catch that one lazy bass. And as I got older, with career stuff and kids, I kind of dropped out for a little bit and then kind of came back and got involved in CCA and met a lot of people that kind of helped me steer me the right way and fine tune my approach and help me kind of get better as time went. There's a lot of people out there you can learn from. The biggest mistake is when you think you know everything, because that's when you really don't.
Right on. So true. And everything in life, right? So Travis, I'm wondering, what is it about fishing that you're just so passionate about?
Well, getting, a little older each year, when I was younger, there's, competition in sports, and, playing hockey started to get a little harder on the knees. And, it's kind of like a competition out there against yourself where like you can decide, like, I want to catch a red drum and that's going to be my goal. And you dedicate yourself to scouring the internet and talking to people and going out and trying over and over again and get proficiency and then get good at it. And then you might move to the next fish. So to me, it's kind of like just that passion there's always something to learn. There's always a next level. You can compete against yourself. And the one nice thing about the sport is there's no ending to the next possibility, be it a different tactic to catch the same fish or just a different fish or a different region. There's always something to do to, better yourself in fishing. There's always something out there. Now with the charters, I get the joy to kind of work with people who are, sometimes they're advanced anglers, but sometimes they're that, angler that's just kind of getting into it. And you see the excitement when, it's not uncommon to have a fishing trip where the entire boat gets a personal best and everyone's, so excited. And they're fish that if I took some of my fishing buddies on, they might not have been so thrilled about it. But when you're coming in and everyone kind of learns something, or the light bulb moment clicked, or you can see when that angler, really starts to love, the sport. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's kind of what I think of with that.
Yeah.
No, that's good stuff. I think you bring up a lot of great points. I was an athlete when I was younger, and obviously I can't go out and play football anymore. But that competitive drive in you, just because you're not 21 anymore, that competitive drive doesn't go away. And just wanting to push to constantly get better is a really cool thing about fishing.
Yeah, shows like this are a great community where even I saw in one of your earlier podcasts where people are connecting in the chat, and you can meet people and just keep getting better. There's really no limit to striving to get better, and it's fun along the way. So that's what I like about those aspects of the community.
Yeah, there's some really great guys. Rashawn's already chimed in here and said hello. Hey, Rashawn, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah.
But speaking of that community,
Yes.
we have a little tradition that we've established here where the guest, which in this case tonight is you, Travis, and there's some more people logging in now, so it's good timing for those that just logged in. We have a tradition where the guest chooses the question of the night, and that the question of the night wins a prize. And Travis, have you put that prize together, or were you too busy teaching kids today?
Well, I was doing that, but I didn't get a chance to actually put the prize together, but I do have the prize. I'm going to put together roughly about $50 worth of lures, mostly Z-Man lures, and I'll probably try my best to tailor it to whoever wins. I'll ask them
Oh,
see what I can do within
that's
reason
kind of cool.
to fit their
So,
fishing.
so they're not the Z-Man plastics aren't set. So if I'm a striped bass fisherman, right, I might get something from Travis, whereas if I'm a speckled trout fisherman, I might get something else, right?
Yep, that's the idea.
Oh my gosh.
Might as well
That's
wait.
pretty
That's awesome. I love that.
You know.
Yeah. That's
All right.
brilliant.
All right, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So question of the night is going to get a custom package put together from Travis. It'll be Z-Man Plastics. And I guess Travis will reach out to you and work out what would be the best package for you. Without further ado, let's get into the nitty gritty of jigging. Let's talk about, let's start out with what is your basic technique? If you can walk imagine that Anastasia and I have never stepped foot on a Chesapeake Bay boat and jig for striped bass. How are you going to walk us through that?
Well, what I start when it's the bare basics is the key is when you're using a braid, you don't want slack in the line. That's the big enemy. And I usually show people a demonstration where, you can try it at home if you have a rod that's like medium fast and medium extra fast. And if you have someone hold the lure in their hand while the line's tight and you just tap that. So if you have that jig head in your hand and the line's tight and you just tap it, you'll feel it when the line's tight. And when the line's loose and you tap it, you won't feel anything. And that kind of gives the people the idea that really when they jig and they just keep the rod up and you see the line just sitting there in the water, first following the rod back down so it stays tight. That's one of the main things that I tell people really to focus on, just keeping the line tight than worrying about like the action they're imparting, because that's really step one, because you're not using an artificial. And if you don't feel that strike, you're never going to set the hook. And, you're going to have, these rockfish are eating that bait. It's plastisol or elastec. They're eating it. They're spitting it back out, especially the bigger ones. You never even known, you could add a 50-inch fish with the lure in the mouth and you didn't even know. So that's step one, just keeping your line tight.
Oh, did we lose them?
That might have been us at first.
Oh no. Okay. All right. So talking about jigging, actually I did a little bit of that today in an unusual situation. When we were fishing for specks, we caught quite a number of other types of fish today, but reds, yeah. So what are other scenarios in which you would jig for a fish?
Well,
what type of fish?
And mainly in the bay where I'm fishing, I kind of consider jigging and casting. So like to go back to kind of like the rockfish, like kind of step two with the rockfish would be, it depends whether the fish are on the bottom or whether they're mid depth, right? So if they're at the bottom, you're going to let that line play out to the bottom. And the line starts running, you're just going to be kind of doing a slight lift and kind of let it fall. What you see a lot of times is, people will ask me all the time about snap jigging, and I think it's a good technique that you can do. But when you're first starting out, I like to just keep it simple and let that line kind of fall, and the fish hit on the fall. So if you keep that line tight, they're going to hit and you set the hook. Okay. But the other thing you can do sometimes is cast away from the boat and set the bail and let that lure just fall through the column. And if you keep that line tight, you'll feel that fish hit. But as far as different scenarios, I don't know if you would call it, jigging, but, I would cast artificials in the bay for trout, red drum.
Red drum.
There's an emerging fishery where I call it sonar sight fishing for cobia, where you drive around for a little pod of 2 or 3 and throw at them. You got to be it's a grind and you have to be dedicated to it, but you can do it.
And you got to have a nice sonar too.
Yeah, and it's a lot. You have to really understand that sonar. You really have to know how to mark the spots and know where they are. I think the biggest mistake people make with side image is they don't realize that it's a history. So everything you're seeing is behind you. So when you see that fish off to the right of the boat, it's really the back right, So, and you have to learn your own boat where they're at. So when you turn around and throw, you're throwing to the right spot. And it just takes time. It's like what I talked to you earlier about, those are all tools. So if you have that side image, you could buy a nice side image, but it's just like a doctor. I could walk in the doctor's office that has all the best tools, MRI machines, state-of-the-art robotic surgery. But if I don't know how to use it, you don't want me to do your operation, I'm pretty sure. So it's just like on a boat. You can have radar, side image, 2D, you just have to learn your equipment. And once you learn your equipment, you just get more proficient. So, but I mix up casting and jigging sometimes. And I think some people do use them interchangeably, like anything where you toss a lure, you're on, people kind of consider that light tackle at times. So,
yeah. Well, I think that's a great point too for fish. So knowing your tools, but also knowing your fish and the season, right? So like today when we went out, knowing how fish react to different temperatures was really instrumental in us catching fish today. Instead of quick, it's drop, slow, wait, okay, bounce, slow. So it was a little different because of the temperature and the body of water we were in today.
And then noticing as the day warmed up, the fish became a little bit more active, for sure.
Like the current. And what do you think, Travis?
That's a great point. Like right now in the winter, I'm dead sticking a lot, and I'm literally just holding that rod still with tension and feeling the bumps. And I might every once in a while give it a little motion. But for the most time, I'm just sitting there holding it. But it's almost like Wild Wild West, like a gunslinger. As soon as you feel that motion, it's instantaneous, like, as fast as a hook set you can do. Because it's just a subtle bite. It's big fish lazily bumping. They're trying to eat a gizzard shad or a perch, and they don't want to expend a lot of energy, especially the larger fish. So sometimes when you're doing all that motion, they don't want to work that hard. In the summertime, you're at the Bay Bridge pilings, you're probably going to be snapping that lure and moving it left and right and all over the place to get a schoolie to kind of respond. I got a friend, Jay Barry, who's taught me a lot about fishing, and he calls it kind of like the seagull theory, if I say it right, where if if we're out in the parking lot and there's one seagull and you throw that French fry out in the parking lot, it's going to look at it for a while and think about if it want to bite it or not. If there's 20 seagull in the parking lot and you throw that French fry, it's not even going to hit the ground. So in the summertime, a lot of time you have competition going on. You have smaller schoolies. They're going to compete for that bait and try to get it. But in the winter, usually you're going for that bigger, smarter fish, and it's not going to do all that work. It's just going to wait for that easy meal. And you have to be ready, but you might only have one shot.
That is true. Good point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've always thought that striped bass are among the most competitive fish I've ever targeted. So, obviously there's seasons and depths and all sorts of things that you have to take in mind. But take a fish, take all of the fish that we target in the Chesapeake Bay. So that, that's thinking about striped bass, redfish, speckled trout, cobia now, right? And then we even have, we get Spanish mac, right? And we use jigs for them. So all of those fish in their typical settings, what's going to be your favorite jig for each one?
Oh, for each fish? So, well, the mackerel are easy. I just happen to have one or two stand. Like I like the rain minnows. The 1 ounce or there's going to be a ½ ounce rain minnow coming out, and I like to jig them and cast them. And I'll give you a tip: if you can ever get yourself where you're on a school of max, and you can get yourself in shallower water, like 9 to 12 feet, it's like taking candy from a baby. Why? Baby would have candy in the first place, but you just cast that lure out and you can jig them down on the bottom sometimes or rip them in.
Yeah.
And you'll just do great. It's phenomenal. And they hold up well. And they also, you know, if you reel too slow, you start catching rockfish. So that would be my go-to for the max. I mean, you can catch them on plastics, but I don't really see the point. And one thing I always caution the people on my boat with the mackerels are, you know, it's really not a catch and release fishery, in my opinion, where those mackerel, they give you everything they can. So if you're like, you know, have your fill of what you're going to put in the smoker or eat, it's not really a great fishery to catch them and throw them back. Like I just don't think they're living through that fight. So it's just something to think about. But you know, you can keep a good deal of them, and they're delicious as ceviche or broiled. So they're one of my favorite fish for people to catch on light tackle. We caught a 32-inch this year, which was the biggest one that I've seen. And we had 3 29-inch mackerel. So it was a really good year. I think almost every trip we had multiple, you know, citations, and it's probably the easiest citation to get at 22 inches, but we had a lot of them, and it was a lot of fun. With rockfish, I really like the GI jig, and my favorite when they're on a bunker bite is a Streak XL unskirted, but I will use skirts when I'm trying to go for a lighter profile on a smaller, like schoolie class fish. But I do like to use those big Streak XLs. They just have that big, large profile that fits that bunker. So it's a great lure to have, you know, on the boat, and it holds up all day. So for me, being, you know, a light tackle guide, it's great to not have to switch plastics out all day. So I like that. And then when the drum are around, the last thing you want to be is a guy who's jigging, like, you know, you're jigging a bare lure because, you know, the fish bit the plastic off, and you're just, now some people do catch drum on that, because the drum, you know, they'll pretty much take to anything. Moving into the drum, I like to use a 1.5 ounce weight, and I like to use a diesel minnow if I can, like a 7-inch diesel minnow. And one of the main reasons are when they're up on top of the water, you can launch it from the boat and reel it in. And I've had a few drum where we were like basically sight casting for them. I think I see Alex on here. Like, we've caught a few like right on the surface, and we saw them eat the bait, which is pretty awesome. And then when it's on the bottom, you know, you can jig that plastic on the bottom and they'll pick it up as it floats. So, and it can hold up to the bluefish, because a lot of times if you find the bluefish, you're going to find the drum in the summer. But I've seen them eat the mackerel too. They circled the mackerel up and ate them. So with trout, I just do the same thing, but a way smaller jig head. Light as I can go, casting along shorelines is how I like to do it. Like the islands, or, you know, like the Honga River, stuff like that. But we have a lot of diversity in the bay, in my area, the Middle Bay, so that's nice.
Sure. Do you have a color of each of these jigs that you prefer?
The colors.
I mean,
yeah, so
I'd say for drum and cobia, pink is like, if you could only pick one, they seem to really like. Trout, I like anything that has a green tail, because that can mimic like the shrimp. The green, we're getting a lot more shrimp every year in the area, but some, you know, trout are the finicky one. They're probably the one that changes colors the most. And then for rockfish, I like chartreuse or white the most, but I'll use gray, like a natural color too. But you know, there's certain times a year I want to use purple. So, I mean, I'll go through the color spectrum, but if you're asking me to pick, like, if I can only have a few colors, it'd probably be white, chartreuse, and gray. But there's times I'm going to use black, purple, or, you know, there's certain times for everything. You know, certain applications, and certain times, you know, they're going to work a little better. And the winter is the one time that this year, the main thing that I really picked up this year that I didn't do in previous years was I really found a good use for heavy metals. Heavy metals, and really paid off sometimes when plastics, you know, weren't catching. I will say my best fish probably still came off the plastics, but sometimes the metal, just for whatever reason. And we really got into like butterfly jigs that you would use offshore, like 2.8 ounce, whatever they are, like 90 to 120 grams, 100 grams. And those butterfly jigs really seem to catch rockfish on times when they were just, they had lockjaw and wouldn't bite. And for some reason, a chartreuse with a glow white or different combinations of those lures they really got the job done. So, if I had 3 or 4 people on the boat, I'm going to start everybody with something different. And then, if someone catches 2 or 3 fish on something, I might switch them all out. But I know some people don't believe in colors, but I've had too many times where switching a color has been the difference between catching and not catching, or catching a quality fish versus not catching quality fish. Like, I've seen too much evidence to just, I believe colors do matter.
Yeah, it's the other thing about metal that I'll say, and I'm sure you've noticed this, Captain, is that for a beginning angler, metal helps them feel the bottom easier.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up, because if you are a new angler and even if you're jigging, a traditional plastic, we always recommend someone use, a quarter to a half ounce heavier than what, everyone else is, because the typical rule is that most people will tell you is you want the lightest weight they can get and hold the bottom. But if I have someone starting out, if I'm using 3/4, and they probably would have a 1 ounce, right? But when you give someone a 3 ounce metal, it gives them a chance to warm up a little bit, like you said, and then switch to a plastic. And I really go off the if it works, it's right philosophy. What works one day may not work the next. And I don't really have a set color. I'll have that color I tied on. But look, if I'm out there and I tell you, chartreuse was killing it yesterday, and you've caught your 3rd fish on white and I'm not catching, I'm changing that lure fast. So I'm not going to sit. I don't need to see that, too many times to know that I need to change what I'm doing. So
yeah. Down here in North Carolina, we used, we were with our friend NC Pierman, Tim Taramelli, who's Native Kayak Pro Staff. But this is not a color that I would normally associate with use on the Chesapeake Bay. And it, back in these little creeks, it was just it was just deadly.
Well, I think I don't know what you think, Travis, but we tried a smaller one with a shorter tail, got nothing. We used this that has a longer tail, and it's a little bit more action going on with the tail, and I caught 6 puppy drum.
Yeah, just a short period, yeah.
And it actually beat the live bait today for me, which is crazy. So that was our action today.
Phil asked, did I miss the Cobia question?
Very important.
And the answer to that is, Phil, no, you didn't, and you can ask it whenever you want.
Yeah, we were talking about that. There's always this, and there's a lot of guys who cite casts for cobias and spend a lot of time doing it, and I don't spend that much time with the cobia, but I've played around with the with the casting for them. Me and LJ did it a few times, and we got lucky a few times. And the one thing we learned is, you can mark them on the side image, and if you mark them and drop down, there's certain times when they're not in that spawn where they'll oblige you and they'll hook up. And I've tried hair jigs, traditional sight casting hair jigs, and we tried the regular soft plastics we would throw for the rockfish, and both seem to be successful. So if you have that lure you love, I can't tell you which one's going to be the best. It seems like certain years they key in on certain colors, but a lot of times it seems like if you just have to pick a color, you can't go too wrong with pink and oranges and those bright colors they seem to like. And I really want to dabble with some of the metals with the cobias, because I know they're eating our bunker when they're here. I think a little more than they are the eels, and I like when they're way up our way in the middle bay, and I like to throw some of those large spoons at them and see what they do, like flutter spoons, if I get a shot at them.
Yeah, they keep pushing further and further up the bay. I'd be interested to see where they are in 3 or 4 years if people are catching them with regularity at Thomas Point or something like that.
We've caught keepers at Breezy. It got unbuttoned from us, but we had a very large cobia right off the marina at Breezy Point, and I know I've had friends catch them, at Sharps Island a lot too. So, they seem to be the bay, not to get political or say why, but the bay is getting warmer every year. So it's getting warmer every year, and we're getting different fish pushing a little further each year. And, it fluxes from year to year, but they're definitely, we're definitely seeing, this year was a little off, but we're seeing more redfish every year, seeing the blue cats popping up here and there. So, the trout seem to make, the periodic, showing. So, the rockfish may not be doing super great, but, we're having some exciting developments with some other species. So.
Yeah, and then you got COVID. I mean, right?
You just threw COVID in there? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He said something about not being political. I was like, oh, COVID.
No.
We got a question coming in from our buddy Junior. Junior Jimenez asked, my question is, if you have a beginner in your boat, mention the 5 best lures that you would recommend talking about stripers. I think it is good to help beginners to make their fishing successful. So 5 lures you got to recommend to, you're trying to hook a beginner up on striped bass. Thanks, Junior. Good question.
I have beginners in my boat a lot, and I use the heavy metals. So I'll give someone a 2 or 3 ounce metal. So that could be your favorite metal. It could be a bunker spoon. It could be like I talked about, those Shimano butterfly type lures, and they make the Nomads and the different brands. But I guess it has to be a good friend if you're giving a beginner a $15 lure. But I give them the same stuff that I'm using, but a lot of times I'll switch over to more of a paddle tail. So I'm really a big fan of having people use like 5-inch when it's rockfish time. I like the Z-Man white and chartreuse paddle tails. Sometimes I'll skirt them, sometimes I won't. And I'll just, like you talked about earlier, Grant, I'll give them a little bit heavier of a jig head than what I'm using. But a lot of times I'll give someone a 1 ounce, if I would to use a 3/4 jig head with a paddle tail. And that paddle tail, even if they're dead sticking it on the bottom, or you just tell them, cast it to the bottom, take 2 reels, jig, 2 reels, just move it through the column. A lot of times they'll catch on that paddle tail. I'll have clients where I just tell them, cast away from the boat and just reel in slow. And they catch rockfish doing that with the paddle tails. So I definitely recommend paddle tails, the bunker spoons. And then I just put them on the same lures I'm using, just heavier. So I just use the same exact lures. So I'll give them a GI jig with any soft plastic that I'm using. And sometimes I'll put a skirt on it to give them a little more action. But I don't even know if I got 5. It's just I give them almost the same things I'm using, but I would really focus on those metals and making sure their jig's heavier so they can feel the bottom. And then once they have some success, then give them a larger lure that's lighter and see if they can, do as well. So I usually start people on metals, then I move them to swim baits, and then I use them to like the jerk shads. However, in that lineup, there's nothing saying that I wouldn't use. I don't want people to think that the swim bait means that it's for a novice. I'll use the swim bait myself. There's times when that lure is just killing it. So, but that's what I would do in a situation where, if we just rolled up the point lookout and I have people who, hey, I want everyone to get catching, I definitely would give someone a metal, give someone a swim bait. And then if, people kind of, showed up with their own rods, I probably put the larger jerk shads on their rod because they're probably going to impart the action on their own. So, I mean, that's only at 3, but I feel like you're covered at that point. That's what I do on the boat. I don't really break it down less than that.
Yeah.
I hear the teacher in you, Travis.
Yeah.
I hear you scaffolding information for your clients. I hear you differentiating instruction. I hear you doing all sorts of things that a teacher would. I would imagine you use a fair amount for, there's a lot of crossover in your 2 careers, I would imagine, right?
Well, yeah. And one thing I like a lot of times, if I have beginners on the boat, I'll also try to make sure, and it's kind of odd for a light tackle boat, but I'll try to have a mate. And that mate, may be, a good friend of mine that's going to come on the boat that day. And, they're going to work really hard to fish next to you, because if you're the captain of the boat, and if you've just been on your boat yourself, you're thinking about tides, currents, what's on my chart, what that boat next to me is doing, where am I going to go to next, like, what's going to be my next move. You don't have a lot of time to tie leaders and switch people's lures out. So if I have a mate on board, I can have them sit with someone and fish with them and show them, like, this is how I caught that fish, not just pass a rod off to someone every time they catch one, but get them to the point that they're learning, how to do different jigging techniques. And then they finally get to catch those fish themselves. So a lot of times I'll utilize a mate, and that's really helpful. So if you don't have a mate, a lot of times you just want to stand next to that person and show them what you're doing, because a lot of times we forget what we know in fishing. Like, we know a lot more than we think we do, and the things that we take for granted that we do, like if you're just doing a slow roll because it's the winter and the person you're watching, their line's all out or they're jigging too fast, it's really important to sit there with that person and show them what's working or why it's not working. So, it's not just the lures, it's the sitting there with that person and watching over them and really making sure they're getting it. So I feel like it's more of the instruction than it is the lure. And if you combine both, you're on the right track to making that person have a successful day on the water. And a lot of that also goes into equipment. I don't want to jump to that yet, but when we were talking about jigging, a lot of that for each species, there's an equipment issue with each one too. So, we could talk about that later, but you definitely have to have the right equipment to have a good day on the water.
And if we had time, this is a lot of dense information here. You got a question?
Oh no, I was just thinking about the metal versus plastic. So when Grant and I are out fishing, my go-to is always metal. I love metal. A lot of things that you were saying earlier, I can feel it really well. So Grant will go head to head, kind of, sort of. And he'll go for the plastics, and I go for the metal.
Time.
And the metals always work for me. So I love metal. I just want to say that. I love metal.
Yeah, and what you also have to give people the right equipment, right? So
yes.
If we went to the golf range right now, you could give me a $100 driver and a $500 driver, and I probably wouldn't know the difference right now. But if you gave me just hot garbage, I'm not gonna have a good time. If it's bent, everything's going sideways, I'm slicing everything. So with fishing, you really want to make sure if you're gonna jig, and you need to invest in some proper gear, and you definitely need, for most applications, a medium rod. Medium heavy will work when you're going up to those heavier 2 and 3 ounce lures, but for most 3/4 to 1 ounce, you'll be fine with a medium. And you really want extra fast tip. Now, that being said, if it's a guest rod or a Klein on the boat, you're probably getting a fast tip because they're really easy to break. But if an extra fast is going to give you the highest sensitivity, and I really recommend using 10-pound braid. The only time I use 15-pound braid for rockfish is if I'm in like a high abrasion area, or I know I'm targeting 40-inch and up fish. That's the only time I would move to 15. The caveat would be cobia and a red drum. I go to 30, but I don't want to go on that tangent yet. But basically, really, you got to have the right rod and reel. And back in the trolling days, no one cares about buying planer boards and 12 rods, but a lot of people have a hard time coming off $100 or $200 for a nice quality fishing rod. But if it's in your hand all day, it's a great investment. There's a lot of local guys making rods. I really like, Ron makes an SC5, which is a St. Croix rod that I really like. And it's 6'3", it's medium extra fast, and I can use it for trout, rockfish, cobia. I caught a 50+ inch rockfish this year on that rod. It can hold up to the heavy fish in open water, and you just feel everything. And if you give that beginner person a nice rod, they're going to have a more successful day on the water. If you give them, an ugly stick, there's nothing wrong with them, but you're not going to feel the same with a better rod. And then you definitely want to have a 2,500 to 3,000 reel that smooth. So when you hook that good fish, the drag doesn't give you trouble and you lose the fish.
Yeah.
And you want to have braid. You can't really jig well with mono. If you go back to it and try again, you're like, how did I ever do it? So I do recommend with jigging, one of the best things is have quality equipment. It really will take your game to the next level. I think it's probably one of the more important aspects of it is the rod, to be honest. If you ever try, there's people who come on the boat and they'll try one of the rods that are the more expensive ones, and trust me, they can tell real quick. They can feel the sensitivity. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, you and I are. I'm a former teacher. You currently work in education, but I think about this kind of thing all the time. And one thing that's very different about fishing, I've always felt, is you don't really learn much from fishing through failure, right? You really kind of need to catch fish to establish a pattern. And having, a better rod with more sensitive line, with the, right pound leader and the right pound test, is going to allow you to have success and allow you to start to develop that pattern. Fishing is all about patterns. It's all about, repeating the same thing over again based on certain conditions. So that's a big one. I want to go ahead. You sort of answered this question, but David asked a question that applied to what you just said. So I wanted to make sure it got posted so that it gets consideration for the question of the night, because it is a good question. And David asked, what type of rod, reel, and plastic jig should a beginner start with?
I like the beginner questions. There's a lot of beginner questions.
Yeah, we got a lot of heavy hitters coming in with some great questions here, but I wanted to make sure that was in. Travis, did you want to add anything to what you just said based on David's question?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely can be a budget factor here, but you can get a nice beginner rod for like the $100 range. And maybe medium fast would be the way to go. And then once you really know that you like it and you love it, then you can buy that more expensive rod, and now you have a nice guest rod or a backup rod. I usually like to have 2 rods that are my go-to rods for every fishery I do. So, you could start out with that nice, $99 to $200 rod, and then eventually move up to that $300 and $400 rod when you're really going to stick to it. As far as reels go, I really believe in like crying once with like personal reels. So I definitely go in that, $150 to $200 range. I mean, I'm spending your money right now, so you can do whatever you want. But that $2,500 to $3,000 class, and I would go with 10-pound line. If you're throwing artificial, you're going to feel a lot more. If you want to put 15, you can, but don't go past 15. And I also use fluorocarbon leader. I don't really want to give you a brand, rod and reel. I think I would start with spinning and then dabble with the bait casters. You can catch a lot of good fish with spinning rods. You don't have to have a bait caster. Typical kind of rule on my boat is I stock it with spinning reels, because if you know how to use a bait caster, you're probably bringing it. That's one thing that I usually do. But I definitely would stick with the 10 to 15 pound line braid, 30-pound leader, a 2,500 to 3,000 reel, and medium fast to medium extra fast. And the more money you spend on that rod, the more sensitivity you're going to have. So it's just your budget's going to be your friend there. Like, how much do you really want to spend? You shouldn't have to go past 300 or 400, but I say 150 to 200 is a sweet spot. Usually, some like St. Croix have an SC3, a SC4, a SC5. Once you're in that SC3 range, you're pretty good. SC2 is kind of a little bit not as much of a touch. And see, for jigging, you really need that touch. That's one of the ones that you need the touch more than anything. You're going to feel a red drum hit, big bull, in open water. You're probably going to feel that cobia hit. But for rockfish, sometimes it's just such when they're sitting there and they're barely eating, sometimes you barely feel it. So a sensitive rod's definitely the key.
I'll throw a couple of brands, just for samples, guys. Basically, in the price range that Travis is talking about, I think a St. Croix around that $100 mark. There's several of them that run from 100 to 125. I like 6 feet personally. 6'3", Travis I mentioned is great. For reels, Battle 2. Battle 2 is a great reel. It's, you can get it on sale, $75 sometimes. Daiwa makes a fantastic reel right in that same price range. There's a lot of reels. But, those two are, those St. Croix rods in that price range, and those 2 reels is going to get you a really nice setup under about $175. Lots of great questions coming in, but LJ, LJ said, how do you tap out a monster cobia when you leave your bat at home in the truck?
LJ set me up for this. So we were on a trip in his boat, and I think we caught a few nice cobia that day, and we released quite a few too. I don't want everyone to think we're fish killers, but you got to eat a cobia every once in a while. They're delicious. And we didn't have our bat, so I used a wrench one time, and the other time I used the deck brush. And the deck brush was more effective than I ever thought it would be. LJ was he was mad at me because I didn't. If you ever fish with LJ, he likes things to be regimented a certain way, the ex-military in him. And he's like, you forgot the bat? Like, come on, man. And then I said, wait, I got it planned out. And he was surprised how efficient that the deck brush was. Did a pretty good job on that cobia. And that was a pretty awesome. Yeah, we had 2 keeper cobia in like 15 minutes.
All right, got some great questions rolling in. John W., I love this one. It has been great to see a lot of the light tackle guides pushing for catch and release. Are you seeing more of the clients moving away from catch and kill? Any comments on April CNR closure? You can not touch that one if you'd like. The end of it.
I'm seeing a lot of education. I'm glad you asked this question because
good question.
One thing that I've learned is there's definitely a group of people who, when they go on the bay, it's their one shot on the bay, and they really want to bring that rockfish home for dinner. And then there's people like most people on this chat. We have opportunities to catch rockfish a lot. So it's easier for me to throw back a rockfish than I think someone who's haven't been on the water a lot. And it might be their only rockfish they caught all year. But what I am seeing is I am getting groups of clients that will come on the boat and tell me right from the start that they don't want to keep their fish, or they don't care about keeping the fish. They just want to catch. And I'm definitely seeing more of that. And it's kind of nice to see. I mean, I think I had rockfish once or twice this year. I'll harvest one every once in a while. I feel like if everyone's responsible and only takes what they need for spill in their freezer, I think we all be in a better place than we are right now. But I definitely see that happening. And one fun thing about being a guide is you really get a chance to talk to people and explain to them, the situation we're in and, why we don't target fish in the summer. There's a few guides who don't. There's a few wreck anglers who, choose not to catch rockfish in the middle of the summer and go fish for drum or cobia or trout or, other things. And, we just explain to them about the situation, and it's a great chance to educate the people on the water because, you can preach on Facebook and get in arguments with people on social media, but when you have someone on the boat and you have them there all day, they're a little more receptive to listening because they see live the issues you're facing. And it's really nice to see that happening. The April closures and all that stuff going on, there's so much politics involved in that. Like, if it was about the fish, I'd be fine with it, but there's definitely a push to demonize catch and release fishing right now, and there's a lot of finger pointing. I think everyone's trying to blame the other state, or commercials blaming rec and rec's blaming commercial, and everyone's kind of blaming each other. And I'd really like to see the fish be the priority, and I think most people do. But unfortunately, the situation we're in, there's money changing hands, and there's politics involved, and hopefully people start to make common sense closures. Like a lot of guides like me, we'd be fine with one fish. We don't really need. We don't feel like we need to, for our business personally. But if you talk to other charter captains, they don't feel like they'd be able to survive without, 2 fish. But I really feel like, and this is not saying anything about anyone else, I really feel like at this point, when you're on the bay, to me, it's more of about an experience on the water. So I hope that if, you were on my boat, that even if you didn't catch a fish for your cooler, or even if it was a struggle out there, that you still had a great experience on the bay. You got on the bay, you got to see, some things you got to do. You got to see parts of the water you never saw before. Hopefully you learned a lot about fishing and the bay itself. Maybe we even stopped for lunch at a dock bar, or, got a Smith Island cake or something, for that day. Like, it's just hopefully, a lot of people, they've never been under the Bay Bridge before even. So, a lot of it for people, it's a chance to get people on the bay and show them the resource. And some of my favorite customers are the people who never had a rod in their hand, because they're totally clueless to the question John asked. Like, they don't even know there's a problem with rockfish. Right. So it's a great chance to kind of grab people, and as people from all walks of life come on your boat, and you really get a chance to talk to some people that are pretty influential about things that are going on the water. So a little bit of a long answer, sorry, but
no, it's needed to be said. It's great knowing that, guys like yourself, and, if I leave anyone out here, charter captains, it wasn't on purpose, but yourself and Jamie Clow, Walleye Pete, Brian McCormick, guys like that are really out there, as stewards of the sport and serving to educate people. So I really thank you guys for that.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said was brilliant. And I also think it transcends state. We've been fortunate to fish in a couple of different states over the past the past 2 months. And I think everyone feels the same in other states, even North Carolina here. But I like what you said, and I think it brings it back home to, it's really about the experience and the journey. I mean, we had an amazing experience and a journey today, a really interesting one. But it was really connecting with our guide. That was just an amazing opportunity and a really great blessing. And how we, even Grant being such a seasoned fisherman, I would venture to say that you learned a lot today, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's being open to hear each other, and enjoy that experience together, because I mean, I could have fished out there until 10 o'clock tonight just because of the great company we had, and the camaraderie, and learning and bouncing ideas off of each other, and trying different lures. We did so many great things. I think if you miss that, you lose so much about what fishing is about.
Yeah. And that's really well put, and about the experience, and grasping that. And, I've been guilty in the past of getting frustrated when I'm not catching fish, and forgetting, wait a second, I'm on a boat in the middle of the bay. This is an amazing experience.
Yeah.
I'm not going to also get too much into the politics. I want to get back into the fishing. But I will say this. We're down here in North Carolina, and there's a reason why we have a flourishing population of redfish up in the bay, and in Virginia, and in North Carolina, and in South Carolina, and in Georgia, and in Florida, and in Louisiana, and in Texas. And that reason is that all up and down those areas, they've gotten together and created a unified front in terms of what their keeper regulations are going to be. And that would be a great thing for the striped bass population. I'll get off my soapbox, but I mean,
dangerous.
We're fishing a perfect example of that right now.
Yeah.
Michael Cool has a question.
Yes, Michael Cool. What's the most important thing to learn finding fish, and how to approach them jigging?
That's a good question. And one of the things that I did is I use a good deal of technology while I'm on the boat, but it's like kind of what I alluded to earlier. You have to kind of know what you're looking for. So depths that fish should be in. I run a through haul transducer that's pretty powerful. And the reason is there's nothing that frustrates me more is when I'm on a boat in a bay and someone's just driving across the bay and they have no idea what's under their boat. And I'm like, what are you doing? Because there's so many times where I'm going 30 miles an hour and drive over a humongous school of rockfish and just stop the boat. And there's no birds, there's no nothing. So having a quality transducers, super important. Now you have to know the water to drive over, right? So I'm going to be when I plan my day, I'm going to be driving over what I believe to be quality active water that I look on the DNR report and I know that there's oxygen there. It's not a dead area if it's in the summer. I know that that's a pocket where fish should be. And if I start to mark bait more in 25 foot of water than 35 foot of water, then I'm going to start to scan the depth that I saw the bait a little bit more. And I'm going to keep working that until I, find more clues, whether it be a slick on the water or there's a bird, because we all love to get that phone call from someone that says, please come here to this magical spot. But half the time you're never going to get there in time. And it's always better to be the report. As much as you love to get the call that saves the day, and you're not going to get that call if you never make it. So you got to be out there actively looking for fish. So, use all your tools, use your side scan, use your downage, but you also have to use your brain and you have to go to areas where fish should be. And a lot of that comes down to time on the water, getting reports. Sometimes the best reports are the reports you get during the week from friends who've been out fishing saying, I've been doing really good in 35 foot of water. I've been doing great. And, you get another guy tell you he's been doing great in 40 foot water on the eastern side. So now you have an idea where to look. But, there's always the joke where if I tell you go to buoy 80, that's where I caught my fish yesterday. And you're like calling me 3 hours later, like, hey, I was at buoy 80 for like 3 hours and nothing's happened yet.
That fish wasn't there.
That's not how it works. So, you got to go, you got to look for them. And, you can't, birds are great. Like it's the winter. I'm not going to lie to you. If I see birds, I'm going to be all happy about it. But a lot of times, they're liar birds or that you're going to be run over by other boats. The best joy in the world is to find fish on your meter and no one's around and you have the fish for like an hour. And that's when you're really going to catch your quality fish. So, I don't know how will I answer that because that could be a 5-hour question. Finding.
Yeah, it's a big one.
But,
got another question.
Drop-offs. It just depends on the time of year, really.
Yeah.
Where you would look for them.
Got another question coming in. I hope I pronounce this correctly. It's from Patey Outdoors. And that question is, do you use any wire on your rain minnow jigs when casting to Spanish Max?
So, yeah, I know him. I fished down south a few times, and I would always see a boat always tearing up red drum and trout. And, like many people, I reached out and messaged to him a few times and, got to know him and his sons. They do a great job fishing. I think they tore up one of the tournaments this year on red drum, but I don't use any metal. But what I do is I do sometimes, unless they're being finicky and the water's real clear, sometimes I'll attach 40-pound leader and sometimes 50-pound fluoro leader instead so I don't get them ripped off as fast. And one of my secrets I'll do, because I know you drum fish, I'll cheat sometimes and I'll use a drum reel. So I'll use a 5000 series reel just so I can crank faster. I don't need it for the mackerel, but I can get that lure going faster. But I don't use wire. I don't use any wire, and I haven't, they are sight feeders and they can see. I don't know if that would drop off your catch, but we caught some really big macks this year and we didn't have wire. So it wasn't an issue for us. And I do use fluoro, and I do use 40 to 50.
Okay.
All right. So Jacob A has a really good question, actually. Do you find those mid-bay bulls by chance? Or are you actively targeting them in late summer, early fall months?
Both. So
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
times where there's certain years where they're in a little bit better than others, and you can make a date with them. Like there were a few trips where even in the mid bay I consider to be like from like the Cove Point gas docks to like Breezy Point, you know, and on both sides of the bay, that area, you could leave the dock and drive around just looking for a red drum. You know, you could do that. And we caught them like 3 or 4 trips in a row doing that. So you absolutely can target them. But there's another fishery in the mid bay where if you find bluefish, and trust me, you'll know when it's on because you can smell the drum. You'll smell something. You'll smell in the water. It just smells like watermelon. You'll just get an overwhelming smell of watermelon. And everyone thinks you're crazy when you say this until you know what happens. And you'll see slicks. And when you see the slicks and you get that smell, and you know, it's a dead giveaway if you see dead bluefish floating to the surface. But if you're in a bluefish feed and you put some metal down and everyone else is casting for max and blues and you put a soft plastic and a metal down there and you keep that lure down there, I kind of call you the hero of the day. Like if you're at Point Lookout with a 10-inch bait when everyone else is happily catching, you know, 20-inch rockfish, like you're going for the fences, you will catch a big drum. We did it this year in the mix of the blues and the mackerel. Not so much in the rockfish, but if you're in the blues and max, 100%. You can do both. You can say, I'm going to fish for blues and max and drop a lure down there and try to pull a drum out. So many times on my boats, the clients will ask, what are we fishing for right now? Blues, max, or drum? And I'm like, whichever one you want to catch. That's up to you what you're going to throw at, right? But you can target them. It just, this year for me and a few other people, it was a little bit harder than the previous year. I mean, the previous year we had days where we were catching 25 drum a day, you know, and we were 100% targeting them. Sorry. But in the mid bay, it's more of wolf packs, I find. You know, it's groups of 4 or 5, and you'll see them on your side image, or they'll move through. And one mistake people make with drum, they're way quicker than you think they are. They're extremely fast, and they move fast. And definitely have the right equipment. If you're going for drum, you want to have 30-pound braid and a 5,000 reel because they're gonna spool you real quick on rockfish gear.
Yeah, we noticed that today. Just, you know, taking our little 15-foot whaler through the shallows in 2 or 3 feet of water, and there was probably, you know, 12 to maybe 15, 20-inch little puppy drum, and I couldn't believe how fast they were. I didn't really equate a red drum with being so fast, and these things were moving. I mean, they were booking. It was almost like there's other fish that you see that'll just kind of take off and leave a dust of mud or sand, and it was kind of like that.
Yeah.
The bulls are faster than you would think until you see them in the water. Many times, if you're ever fortunate to be on the bay when there's like an acre blow up of bulls, you'll fish and you'll see them disappear. And while you're still fighting the fish on your line, you'll look like a mile or 2 miles away. They're blowing up like a mile or 2, like they're gone. They're not like rockfish. I mean, they are just flying like missiles in the water. And you look at them and you think there's some big lazy fish. They are not. They are moving out.
For sure. LJ, I think this is another leading question from LJ, but I think it's less tongue-in-cheek than the last one. He asked, what was the most unique fish that you caught last year that we don't normally see?
Ooh, fun question.
That was probably like cutlass, the cutlass fish.
Cutlass, yes.
And it was weird. I was on a tournament, and I was out there. I think Jamie Clow was out there too. And we were just at the mouth of the Chop Tank River, of all places. And our meter was loaded with fish. And we were, you know, messaging each other back and forth, like, did you get them to bite? And I'm like, no. And I switched to a silver rain minnow. And as soon as it hit the water, it was a cutlass fish. And we couldn't catch anything earlier. And we had rain minnows in. So we switched everyone to silver rain minnows. And we caught probably 40 cutlass fish. And they were jumping out of the water and everything. Oh. for probably like an hour, and we caught enough where, you know, my clients were going to eat them because I looked it up on Google and it said they were delicious. So we were like, we're going to try them. And I never heard back how delicious they were, but no one said they were horrible. So I guess they were good. And, you know, we moved on after a while, but it was really fun because they actually put up a good fight. And I think we had a child on the boat that day too. And, you know, it was kind of exciting for them to catch those fish, you know.
They're just so unique looking too. The teeth on these things. I don't know if Eric Packer is on here, but he caught so many.
Oh, he was a cutlass master this year.
Yeah, I want a cutlass.
Yeah.
I just think they're very beautiful and unique. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Travis, we have reached that.
What was in it. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, we caught some fish lately in the channel out of Chesapeake Beach, and they had shrimp in their bellies too. So I don't know if he was talking about that, but
yeah, that story blows me away because, you know, shrimp, if it's one thing they don't love, is cold water. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how that happened. That's one of the crazier stories I've heard in a while. I mean, you hear about, you know, I think Walleye Pete told me there was a king mackerel they caught up in the bay one year. You hear what was not permit, but maybe was it permit or pompano? One of those was caught up in the bay, but like a shrimp in a fish's mouth in January. That's a blowaway for me.
Yeah, there's some Jack Crevelle's too. I know by Sharp's Island. Sharp's Island, you can catch every weird thing over there.
Yeah.
And
Good tip.
Yeah. Well, we are at the point of the show where the question of the night is chosen. Captain, do you have a winner?
There were a lot of good questions. I think I'd have to go with I think it was it the I'm tossed up between the best baits and then the one about the fishing gear for new anglers. I might have to go with maybe I'll have to go with the best baits for new anglers.
Was that David? Just to make sure, was that David Hall? What type of rod, reel, line, and plastic jig should a beginner start with?
That's a good one.
Was that it?
I think it's it.
I think that was the question. Junior had one too, but I think it was him. All
right, let me.
No, it was him.
My question is, if you have a beginner on your boat, mention the 5 best lures you would recommend.
Okay.
Was that it?
That was a good question.
They both were good, but I guess I have to go with one. I'm not trying to make people mad, but I think I'd have to go maybe with Junior's question there. Even though I only gave him 3.
Yeah.
I like that question because it's something that hits home for me on the boat a lot. Like trying to give people, you know, a lure. But I really think a lot of times, like I said before, so it really comes down to you have to make sure that you take that time to sit next to that person and watch when they're fishing too. You just can't, you know, if there was a great lure to buy at the fish store, you know, that would catch fish on its own, you know, we would all buy it, right? So you definitely have to sit with that person and work with them too.
Absolutely. Junior, reach out to Travis directly on Facebook. Does that work for you, Travis?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Facebook or Instagram. Man, it's been a pleasure. We have so much more information that we didn't even touch. So maybe we'll have to bring Travis again.
Oh, part 2.
Maybe
Yeah.
part 2 next year. Man, thanks so much for sharing all the information, for being as detail oriented as you were.
Yes, and humorous. You had some funny jokes in between.
Oh, thanks.
We really appreciate it. Guys, we are going to be back next week. We will have Jim Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
With Heroes on the Water.
Yay.
And we are going to, in the next day or so, we are on vacation, so things might take a little bit longer. But we're going to put something up on Facebook that if you respond and participate, you're going to be eligible to win some really great Heroes on the Water swag. And also bring people in next week, because we really are, we talked to Jim on the pre-show, and he really is looking for more volunteers.
Yeah.
So more of these wounded veterans can have a chance to get on the water. So, you might not get the amazing tip like Travis shared about the watermelon smell, which I thought was great. You might not get that nugget next week, but it's a great cause, and we really would appreciate your support for that next week.
Yeah, for sure. An amazing cause. And I know there are a lot of veterans on right now that can really appreciate that too. And even if you're not a veteran, when we were discussing this, everyone can relate to struggles in life. I mean, if you're not a veteran, at least we can all meet there, that life is hard sometimes. And I know for me personally, and I'll share this about me personally, that when I've been in tough times, nothing's better than being on the water. Whether it's, my time of pier fishing or kayaking or, boating, whatever it is, it's a beautiful experience to be on the water. And I know that even Cambo, when I watched, when you had him on your show, talking about watching the sunset and hearing the birds and being close to nature, there's just so much about fishing besides just pulling a fish out of the water. That is just so amazing, and I think everyone can relate to that on a heart level. So that's how I encourage everyone to tune in next week, because I think it's such an amazing and an important and powerful cause that we all can relate to.
Thank you. That was very well said. And I don't want to add any words on top of that, because I think it'll just cheapen a great way to end the show.
Would.
Travis, you're the man. Thank you so much to each and every one of you guys that chimed in, and we are out.
Got off in town, resident on 70 Road. Got a nice wife and kids, y'all right inside the grove. You know I like Mr. Clark. Yeah, you know he is my friend.